All right, everybody, we've got some new Jrue Holiday rumors in the mix to talk about. We're going to explore Kristaps Porzingis. What is the trade market for Kristaps Porzingis? Plus some updates from around the NBA. Darius Garland has an injury update. He was a big part of our last episode. We'll talk about that, as well as we'll touch on the NBA Finals and other NBA news. All that and more is coming up next here on Green with Envy. You guys know the deal. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will. We are checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Menakis. Greg, good to see you tonight. We got back earlier today one of the first cuts of some of our wedding footage, and one of the highlights that made it in was you handing the mic to my wife Lorena at the beginning of your best man speech to give a what up, what up, what up. So as soon as I said that, instantly popped into my head, and it never feels good when she does it for me.
Yeah, that was quite a moment. I thought you guys already had the wedding footage set up. Is this just like
That
a
was
new
a
cut?
sizzle reel. So they give us like a
Oh,
little teaser reel. So they sent us a longer one now, which is pretty good. I'll send it to you later. But that was one of the moments that made it in. Like there isn't like, it's mostly like footage and then like music over the background. There's like a handful of times it cuts out and you get like the actual audio from some of the vows and some of the speeches and stuff. And that was one of the things that made it in there. So I thought that was pretty good, and it just completely jumped into my head as I said it. I was like, oh, fuck, it really kills me every time she does that impression, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
yeah, she crushes it. She crushes it. Hey, but before we get into all the Jrue Holiday stuff, I wanted to go back to something that Alex and I were talking about because it was
Yeah.
far more controversial than I thought it
Real quick,
was.
shout out to Alex. Appreciate you holding it down for me while I'm still on mixed paternity leave here. So shout out to Alex. But yeah, keep going.
So we posted the breakout clip of my, hastily thrown together Darius Garland 3-team deal going
Mm-hmm.
to the Magic. Cavs fans just not happy about the return in this deal. I just want to pull it up here just for reference sake. Let's get us here on the side. So this was a deal that I came up with, right? Picks. I think on the pod, I may have said like maybe picks. There aren't many picks that need to be involved. The more I've thought about it and the more seeing from Cavs perspective, it seems like the Cavs fans feel like they need all the picks in this deal. But just to kind of recap here, Celtics getting Max Strus and Wendell Carter Jr., the Cavs getting Jrue Holiday, KCP, and picks. So probably the Celtics first round pick next year. And then a couple future firsts from probably both the Magic and the Celtics. And then the Magic acquiring Darius Garland. When I pitched this on the pod, before reading all of the DMs on Instagram and the comments on TikTok, what were your thoughts before seeing the backlash?
So yeah, so our friends over at the stop, the shot, the block. I forget, I believe I believe I'm saying that correctly. Not fans of this trade. But I actually kind of like it. Like I see where it's going. I think to the pushback that it got from the slice of Cavs Nation that we were talking to, I understand where it comes in. This probably isn't option A, but I don't think it's a bad option. Like I really don't. I think I agree that, to your point, when I thought about it more, the Cavs probably need a couple of picks, a swap. There's something else that's sprinkled in here, because Garland is definitely the best player in this, in this setup right here. Like I don't think that's really debatable. You can say who's the better, more impactful playoff player, and then you can kind of get into the minutia of that. But on the whole, when you factor in age and everything, like they are sending out the best player. So I would agree with that, but I think there's appeal. Like I saw this when when Alex first cut up the clip, and I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty. This is well done, Greg. I got to give you a little golf clap here. I think this is pretty well done. I think from all angles, Celtics, you're shedding salary, you're bringing back Strus, who's a guy that fits the Missoula style of play. I will say, I looked into this, I think maybe towards the end of the season. Max Strus, a little bit of an overrated shooter. He's a streaky shooter.
Yeah.
He's not quite the knockdown shooter that I think he gets the reputation of off of that one season in Miami where he did shoot like 41% on like a pretty high volume. Been like 35 to 38% the last couple of years. Like not a bad shooter, but not quite like, I think he's better than Sam Hauser, but Sam's like a true 41% plus. Even on a bad year, he's a 40+% 3-point shooter,
Yeah.
So he's not
Let
quite that, but I like
let me
Strus.
pause you. Let me pause you on Strus
Yeah.
because this was the most surprising thing that I saw in the comments, and it was just Cavs fans being like, we can't give up Strus in this deal. And like, we're giving up our two best contracts in this deal. I saw a few comments
Yeah.
like that. And it was just interesting to see how many Cavs fans have just grown to love Max Strus, where I thought like including him wouldn't be a big deal. I think KCP is probably an upgrade over Max Strus, honestly. Although he had a pretty
Kind of.
bad year in Orlando, I think overall he's a better player than Strus.
Yeah, I responded trying to be kind of even keeled, like, oh, it's kind of a wash between Strus and KCP. I'm taking KCP over Strus. Like, I'll be honest. That's my actual opinion on it. Though KCP did have a down year, I still think his expected output is going to be better than Strus's. Like I really do. Like I think that's actually an improvement. So to me, it's at worst it's a wash, and at best, I think you're actually getting the better end of the swap between those two. Like again, Strus makes sense for the Celtics. Wendell Carter, a guy who I've always really liked. I'm honestly probably the lowest I've been on Wendell Carter in the last couple of years. He's a little underwhelming for me this year. I felt like he could have been one of the guys that help the Magic, kind of ride out a lot of the injuries, and he was just a little bit underwhelming. He was okay in that playoff series. I hate to say it, he had a little bit of a Tobias Harris like feel for me in that playoff series where he'd have 5 minutes where you're like, oh shit, Wendell Carter's having a night. And then by the time you get to midway through the fourth quarter, you're like, did Wendell Carter play in the second half?
Right.
I'm not sure he's subbed in this game. So I like the idea, though, of that type of guy. And a lot of these trades, we'll talk about KP later, but I think a lot of the returns, which, maybe they'll surprise us, as some of the reports today about Jrue Holiday and Celtics looking for a first that we'll talk about surprise me. Like maybe we'll get a surprise, but I think Wendell Carter guys who are on okay contracts, but are maybe a little underwhelming, like that's the right type of area for like a swing right now in trying to reduce. So I love it from a Celtics perspective. I think for the Magic, obviously Darius Garland, that's just like a kind of a perfect fit. And if they can do it without giving up Jalen Suggs, which is really where I think a lot of Cavs fans are at. Like if we're giving up Darius Garland, we want to get Jalen Suggs. He can line up with the Mobley timeline. They can continue to kind of do the 2 timeline approach, right? Because you have Allen and Mitchell that are on the same age range, and then you have Garland and Mobley right now. If you replace Suggs and Garland, you're kind of in the same place with an upgrade on defense, which has been one of Garland's biggest issues, along with his health, which obviously came out today that he'll be having surgery and out 4 to 5 months here, missing the start of next year with that big toe injury. But I think for the Magic, that's clearly the type of guy that they need to kind of jumpstart that offense, which we saw in the playoffs. Just need somebody to help them get going outside of Franz and Paolo. And then for the Cavs, biggest question is back to the timeline word that I use, right? Like if they get Jrue and KCP, that just tells me, like, I don't think that's a bad return. I think it's just telling me, like, hey, we're in on the next, like, 2 years. Like, we're going to make this work on the next 2. And I think for them, getting a pick or 2 hedges their bets where, hey, we can go in on this. And then we know if we need to pivot, number one, we can get in 2 years, we're still going to get a pretty good return if we need to trade Donovan Mitchell to then get stuff for Mobley. And while we're going for it for these next 2 years with Holiday and KCP, if they get a Celtics pick and a Magic pick or 2, or whatever that looks like, you're kind of still playing both sides of the coin. So to me, I was a little surprised at the reaction. Like I get they might want to ideally find a trade partner that I know, like I said, the Jalen Suggs was mentioned for the Magic. A Rockets deal. Rockets, we've gone over that, of a bunch of different younger prospects. Like I get that being option one, but I don't think this is a bad option by any means. I thought this was a pretty well done trade all around.
Yeah, I was really surprised at like Cavs fans still being so high on Garland. Like he's been injury prone. He hasn't really shown up in the playoffs, even when he has been healthy. And he's such a liability on defense. Like clearly, the way that they went out against the Pacers in that series, it was just like, I know Garland was hurt, right? That's part of the deal with Darius Garland, but he's not stopping the Indiana Pacers. You know what I mean? Max Strus isn't stopping the Indiana Pacers. They need, if they want to, that's the team you got to go through in the East next year is the Pacers. And you have to put together a team that has the perimeter, guard your yard. Like, think about how the Pacers play defense, right? Just like every single guy on their team is going to be willing to play straight up man-to-man defense on the perimeter. And if you have Donovan Mitchell, who can play defense when tasked, Jrue Holiday, obviously we know what he can do. And then KCP, with Mobley and Allen on the back line, like that's a pretty formidable five on defense.
You get Hunter
there.
off the bench as well. You get,
Sam Merrill comes in and
guys. Sam Merrill knocks down shots.
Yeah. Sam Merrill replaces Max Strus. Like I like Garland. I've been higher, definitely. Like to your point, I've been higher on Garland in the past than I am right now on him. But yeah, it was strange. I just wanted to get your opinion on that, just to kind of get a feel for, how you were feeling about that trade.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I wanted to bring it up because I did really like that when I heard you and Alex talking about it. And like I said, I really do see the rationale for it. But this kind of leads us into the bit of Jrue Holiday rumors that came out. So I'll read this here, and then we can kind of get into it. But the Boston Celtics are reportedly seeking a first-round pick for Jrue Holiday. Per at HP Basketball, Hall of Famer Mark Stein reported this weekend that Boston is in fact listening to trade offers for Holiday, something most people assumed. While the focus has been on reducing payroll, sources have told the paroxysm. It's HP Basketball.
Paroxysm.
Yeah, there you go. That Boston is setting the price at a first-round pick along with whatever reduced salary comes back in that deal. And so I think, the trade that you were looking at kind of obviously ties into everything that we've been saying here. And when we did the whole Jrue Holiday episode, I know you and I were on kind of different sides of the fence. You were on more this lane here. In the sense that like the Celtics shouldn't have to attach picks. They should be getting like decent value back.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I kind of, and this is what makes it so interesting about the Cavs pushback is I kind of agree with some of the pushback where I really think the 3 years 105 that's coming to Holiday, unless you really are committed to, and that's why I think it's, in my opinion, a small set of teams. And I do think Cleveland actually fits the mold of a team that could talk themselves into, we got 2 years here that this could actually make sense. And then we'll deal with it in expiring. Like, I think that 3 years, 105 is really bad. Like, I just really think it's hard to picture a guy that is on an ascending contract in his mid-30s that can definitively probably not be anything more than your fourth best player on a championship team. And it's not like as that contract goes on, when he gets older, it's not like he's not like, it's not, even if you like Jalen Green, which I'm just using this as an example, you could talk yourself into he's going to get better as that contract goes. Like Jrue Holiday, which is what terrifies me about him coming back, is he's one injury away from that contract being untradeable. Right. That's like kind of where it's at. So that's why for me, this report is really interesting. And I also understand some of the pushback from, people like Cleveland fans who are like, we don't want to go that timeline. Jrue Holiday doesn't fit with what we do.
Right. Yeah, I think with Holiday, the way I look at it is you're going all in next year and then potentially the year after, depending on how things go for you next year if you're the Cavs, right? So I'm not looking at it as the 3-year totality. I'm looking at, is Jrue Holiday worth 1 year, $30 million, right? Because there's always going to be a team that is going to be looking to move some salary around, could talk themselves into Jrue. Because like after next year, it's like, oh, it's 2 years, 70 million. Like we can swallow that. 1 year, 35 million. And then, it's a player option in the last year. Jrue, I highly doubt, I highly doubt he would decline that. But a few years back, there was a report about Jrue Holiday saying that he wasn't going to play like that much longer and that he was going to retire sooner than I think a lot of people thought. And he's like, by all accounts, is just like a really solid dude who might just be okay, walking away from the game of basketball and like spending time with his family. He's made a ton of money in his career. So I wouldn't say it's completely out of the question if Jrue Holiday looks at it as like, hey, the next 2 years, like I'm just going to give it all I got. And then kind of if he's not healthy that last year, like maybe he just walks away. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I wouldn't gamble on that, but yeah, I mean, who knows? Like that is a hypothetical. So you mentioned how much money Jrue Holiday's made. It's a substantial amount. It's like over 200+ million, something crazy. I'm not the first one to bring this up, but I always think this is a pretty interesting question. Greg, if you could choose Would you rather have the career of Drew Holiday or Dame Lillard?
I think Drew Holiday.
You think Drew? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question because it's one of those scenarios
2
where I don't
rings?
have the money in front of me, but the money's fairly similar. But do you want 2 championships and 2 All-Star appearances, or do you want like 10 All-Star appearances, 6, 7 All NBAs, top 75, and a statue in Portland? It's like
Mhm.
2 really good but very kind of different careers. And so I think that's always an interesting question to see. But yeah, I think the market for Holiday is going to be fascinating. And, it sounds like between him and the next guy that we're going to talk about, Kristaps Porzingis, those are the main 2 options for the Celtics here to shed salary. This is not groundbreaking news. This is what we knew well before Jason Tatum had his Achilles injury. We knew that this
Mhm.
was going to be a conversation piece. Unless they won the title and went back to back, then it would have been then the conversation would have been like, just don't do it, Bill. Whatever you got to do, Bill. I know you're new in town, but don't do it. Just we got to try for a three-peat here. But that obviously didn't work out. It wasn't meant to be. So Celtics now find themselves in the position of seeming like Holiday is option 1 to try to shed salary, which I think it should be, because those 3 years, I don't know. I mean, I just think they're gonna, you're like I said, you're 1 injury away from that just not being a movable contract.
Right.
I think that should be the priority to get off of. And then that brings you to Kristaps Porzingis, who has 1 year,
Can I
30
can I
million
can I
left.
pause you real quick
Yeah.
before we go to Porzingis? So I just did a quick little Google search on the Drew Holiday wanting to retire thing. So this
Mhm.
dates back to 2023, before he was traded away from the Bucks. He said that he was keen on retiring after his current deal expires, which was this season, right? So Drew Holiday was saying he was done playing basketball after this season, right? Now you tack on 3 more years. His wife was on board in the report, and his wife was cool with him retiring so that he could, kind of spend time with the family. Just throwing it out there, man. I think it's very unlikely. I just think it's more likely than your initial reaction.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty likely that I was gonna take a nap today, and then someone offered me $120 million not to, and I was like, yeah, you know what? Who needs a nap? I think
Fair.
I'm good. That that changes the situation just a little bit, but yeah, we'll see. I think it's certainly on the table. Drew Holiday does seem like a guy that could theoretically, think outside the box of what you might expect to happen. But yeah, let's transition to Kristaps Porzingis here and talk a little bit about the other major potential Celtic that not even could be is on the market. He's got 30.7 million, 1 year left on an expiring deal. Reports came out today also that it looks like a lot of people are feeling like he's a negative asset, and so it would kind of my theory on Drew Holiday of I think likely you're gonna have to attach a pick to get anything decent back or to maybe move it in a way that you want to. Maybe that's the case for Kristaps Porzingis. How are you viewing KP at this point? Because I think it's just so hard given the way that the season ended with that mystery viral illness
Mhm.
that I've had trouble even really sitting down to wrap my head around. Other than like he's an expiring deal, but who he is, what his value is after the postseason, the illness, I don't really know what to make of it. So let's just start there.
I don't know, man. Like Porzingis really started like annoying me in the second season with the Celtics. Like it he was kind of just going on vibes. You know what I mean? Like the walkouts in the playoffs last year were great, awesome moments. Like the game 1 performance he had against the Mavs. Like all that stuff was great. But like when he came to the Celtics, the big thing that we were worried about was, is this guy gonna stay healthy, and is he gonna be able to rise his performance in the playoffs, because he's never done it before, and he didn't do it. Like this year he was god awful in the playoffs, and you can blame the viral situation that he had going on, but I mean 2 weeks before he was looking pretty good, in
Yeah.
the
I
regular
can't.
season. So I don't really know how much of it was this illness. Was it like the illness mixed with anxiety, mixed with like I don't know. Like, and that's what's frustrating about a guy like Porzingis is, with everybody else what you're getting from them. And then you have
Mm.
this 7'3" unicorn who ends up being like a unicorn, and that you just like never saw him. Like we never really saw the guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. It's like if he comes back, I'm cool with it, because he is a fan favorite. Fans as down as I am right now, like the general fan base loves him. He definitely like brings good energy to the team. He's boys with Jaylen Brown, and if you're gonna hang on to JB for this year, I think if you're gonna trade Jrue Holiday, you're already missing Jason Tatum. You got to give him some running mates out there.
Yeah.
So to do a solid to JB, I wouldn't mind if the Holiday was the move and we kept Porzingis on that expiring deal, so that we see what cookies and cream can actually do when they're the main part of the show. So if he's on the Celtics next year, I'm okay with it. 30 million expiring. Maybe we re-sign him at 18 million a year for the next 3 after that. I think I'd be okay. It's just if he's going to continue to get in the 30s, I'm out.
Yeah, I don't think you can commit to that, and I think this is the biggest difference for me between Holiday and Porzingis in the current situation, specifically looking at their contracts, and why I would be pretty opposed unless, it's of course within context of attaching a pick to get off Porzingis. He's expiring anyways, right? So that's coming off the books next year. And to your point, maybe there's something to be worked out at a lower rate, and he has a bounce back year, if you will, just stays healthy and makes you feel like, okay, at a lower rate, this guy could be someone that we continue to have in Boston. Like I would not love the idea of putting a pick to Porzingis, because I think if you could move off Holiday, there's a comment here in the chat, trading Hauser would save a lot of tax money. You heard correctly, my guy. That is definitely something that I think Hauser being moved is a guarantee. Like, I just think that's the only thing that's a stone cold guarantee, is that they're going to move him. And it's just a question of, do they have to move him in some type of complicated deal at the same time as Porzingis and or Holiday, or if they go real big with JB or Derek White, which I don't expect, but do they do it then? Or, if they make a Holiday move, right? And let's say because the goal is to kind of get under that second apron, at least be under there. That's at like the minimum goal. That's around 20 million. So if they can move Holiday and save, let's say 13 million, then you have Hauser at 10. Maybe you can dump him into cap space. Maybe you can find a 10 for 3, whatever. And there's kind of your answer. Like, that's, I think, the most direct path. With KP, because he's expiring, I think it makes it really interesting to see how they play it, because I just wouldn't fret as much about KP because of that option. And like, to your point, somebody's got to score the basketball, and Celtics need some type of front court help. Like, that's the other scenario in this, is that Al's a free agent, Luke's a free agent, you still got Nemi. Joe clearly is not. I mean, he doesn't dislike Nemi, but you can tell he goes through ups and downs with Nemi, because Nemi has ups and downs constantly. And so, if you're just left with Nemi, I don't think Joe Mazzulla is going to be all that thrilled to start the season with that. So it makes it really interesting to see where this Porzingis thing could go. But I think he's the guy between him and Holiday, even though him, Holiday, and Hauser are the top 3 to get moved, with Hauser being clearly the guy that's out the door, in my opinion. Holiday, if they can make it happen, and then Porzingis being the expiring, I just wouldn't panic on that, because you have that coming off the books, and you'll have options next year. That would be the one out of those 3 that I'm most willing to sit on and eat for a year, if you will.
I'm trying to think of the level of player we would have needed, like replacement player, over Porzingis in the playoffs to have beaten the Knicks. And one name that just comes to mind, and I just want to get your opinion on this. Do you think we hang with the Knicks if we have Nikola Vucevic out there? He's making about $20 million a year.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I haven't checked that one specifically. I'm sure there is. I think he's got 2 years left. Is the Vooch thing? I think something like that. It's tough to say, only because there was so God, this whole Knicks Celtics series is still it just doesn't sit well. Just looking at everything that happened, because it just felt so preventable. Even with all the KP not playing like KP, you still had 2 20-point leads and a 14-point lead. So the answer to me is, like, Vucevic would have likely given you more than KP gave you. So yes, they would have hung better with the Knicks, just because Vucevic likely could do not even likely. Vucevic could do more than what KP gave you in that series. KP's better than Vucevic if we're getting the KP that we have seen, but what he gave you in that series sucked. It was shit. So like, Vucevic can do that and better, right? So the answer to your question is yes. Vuce would have been in that series. And throughout the season, when KP wasn't affected by the illness, I think the answer is no. But specifically in that series, the answer is yes.
Okay. Would you do that deal straight up? Porzingis for Vooch if you got 2 years of Vooch at $20 million?
Not a huge Vooch guy. Don't
Me
love
neither.
Vooch. Yeah. So I wouldn't be thrilled about it, but to my point of your goal is trying to get to under 20 million, is that, that's 10 million. You trade Hauser, you can keep Jrue potentially, and kind of play that one out, because I think Jrue, with 2 years left, is going to be easier to move than with 3 years. I think 3 years is going to be the biggest holdup in any type of Jrue conversation.
Yep.
So I wouldn't be opposed to it, because I think it gives you a similar feel to your team for the next year. And then once Tatum is ready to come back, you've got Vooch on expiring. And so you've got 20 million expiring. You've got some more draft picks that are open that are free to move if you're not moving any this summer. So I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it actually makes some sense. It just depends. For the Bulls, it would be maybe they're just getting out of a year of Vooch. And I don't know. Bulls, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago. The Bulls are one of those teams where I have no idea what they're doing. So
Right.
the Bulls could be super into this idea. They could be super opposed. I really don't know which way that they would potentially go on that. But I think that's a pretty interesting idea. Do you have any other teams or potential trade ideas that you want to float out there?
I mean, let me get your thoughts on the trade I floated out to Alex, just Porzingis for DeRozan straight up.
Again, Kings, another one of the Kings, aka the Kangs, another one of those teams like the Bulls. No idea what they're doing, or no idea what they're thinking. How many years does DeRozan have left on his deal?
I don't know
Okay.
off the top of my head. Yeah.
Try to look that up
I
just
think it's one.
real quick,
Yeah.
but it's one. Okay. I don't like that one as much, just because, like, Vooch, at least you're kind of getting that stretch five, and you're playing a similar style, even though he's more of a hug the 3-point line Al Horford style than KP, who's going to stretch it back to 27, 28, 29 feet. I don't like the
Yeah.
DeRozan deal.
Okay. Yeah, it's one after next year. So he's not an expiring. So he's making 24.75 next year,
Mhm.
age 36 season, 25.75 age 37 season.
Yeah, I mean, the Celtics have kind of, since Gordon Hayward left, right? The Celtics have never really had a really good third athletic wing, right? To pair with
Mhm.
Jalen and Jason, so that you can
Yeah.
kind of always have two of those three on the court at a time. And DeRozan, despite being older, still kind of fits that mold, to a degree. And he's been a guy that's always given the Celtics trouble, but you've seen his play start to decline a little bit the last few years, although, his years and end of his time in San Antonio, and certainly his time in Chicago, gave me a whole different respect for DeMar DeRozan's game, even if I don't think it's necessarily the way I would build a championship team. Definitely got a lot of respect for DeRozan. I just think at this age, at this time, it's not the way that I would go, and I'd rather probably have the expiring money next year than have 2 years of DeRozan. Whereas Vooch, even if you keep him for both the full 2 years, he'll fit into what you have when Tatum comes back, right?
Right.
Like, DeRozan, I think the older he gets, the weirder fit it becomes, and then you're trying to space, and that's never really been an area that he can provide. So I would be out on that deal just because of the second year. Don't think that one would make a ton of sense for me.
Jakob Poeltl.
Yeah, this is one I looked at. I didn't really find a trade that I think made a ton of sense. I like Jakob Poeltl. So
Okay.
I've got him, and another trade that I'm gonna throw out to you here in a second are a couple of bigs that I like, just kind of looking to the future, right? Because we went through the list of center options for the Celtics from last year. Nemi's the only guy. Nemi's under contract. KP's under contract. Al and Luke. Al, if you want to come back on a minimum, I love Al. Al's one of my favorite Celtics. I've said this so many times. You know how excited I get when we do a post game and Al's had a big game. It's just a different energy for me. Love Al. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to him to come back to the Celtics. I don't think it makes sense for the Celtics to pay him even the minimum, because of all the tax implications times 8 or whatever it's going to cost to have him on a team that doesn't have, it's not going to have championship aspirations next year. So I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Luke probably priced out, and that sucks because Luke is the man. Luke's awesome. Would love to have Luke here and have him on some type of deal. Maybe the way, things shake out in the trade market, that does free up some opportunity. But I think looking ahead, like, how can we maybe take a Jrue deal or a KP deal and try to get a building block towards that future, doesn't have to be a centerpiece, but a guy that could be a starting center when you look at some of these playoff matchups. And Pirtle's a guy that I did think of. Like he's one that I would be interested in. He's not going to be obviously that floor spacer,
Mhm.
but he's got a high IQ. Rebounds the hell out of the basketball. One thing that I think has been funny about these playoffs, rebounding's back. Feels like
Yeah.
rebounding's made a big difference in a lot of these matchups. And I
He's
feel like
very
just looking years ago,
Hartenstein-like.
yeah, that's kind of the comp, right? Is that he can be that guy. And you might want to get another, obviously, center to pair him with, who's probably more of a pick and pop guy. So you have like that mix and match. But yeah, I think Pirtle would be a guy that I would be extremely into. And a lot of whispers of the Raptors are looking to make a move this summer, and in some fashion. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I don't
Pirtle's
get
a
it.
guy that interests me. I don't know,
Yeah,
man. They have a lot
I
of
don't
mid-tier
understand
contracts that add
I
up,
don't
but
understand
that's
what's up
about
with the
it.
Raptors at all. They've got RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scotty
I hate
Barnes.
the
Like,
Ingram move for them. I hate it.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense. He's making what, like $36 million a year. I've always like kind of liked Ingram, but when you're asking him to be your number one guy or your number two guy, I just don't think he's that level.
Well, this is something that you've said before. Like Brandon Ingram, like there needs to be a correction of contracts. Like
Mhm.
Brandon Ingram at 20 million, sign me up all day. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like
right.
that sounds great. But then when it gets to, and this is going back to part of my Jrue Holiday thing, is if Jrue Holiday's gonna be your fourth or fifth best guy, you can't feel great about paying him 36 million. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Even
Yeah,
though if you unless you have a team where you're gonna have guys that are getting underpaid or they're young and on the come up, and so they're making less, and then you can, kind of make that work. Brandon Ingram is a guy that he's going to make 36, 38, 40 million. Like what are you going to do with the rest of your team? That's really going to put you over the top. So yeah, definitely not on board with Brandon Ingram, or really know what the Raptors are thinking there. I got another trade idea for you here, Greg, when he
hit me with
goes
it.
for Kristaps Porzingis. So right now, and we'll talk about the NBA Finals here in just a minute. Thunder Pacers tied up at 1. Miles Turner has been a name that kept coming up as the Pacers they're like, hey, listen, we're going to go into luxury tax. We'll bring Miles back, and we'll
Mhm.
see what that price looks like. He's had a really good run. Miles has been a guy that I've always really liked. Hook 'em horns. I was working at UT when he was there, so I kind of have been into his game from the very beginning. When there was a potential chance of Celtics getting him for the Gordon Hayward signing, I was really, really on that train of we should have made that happen. And now Miles Turner, who's always been on the trading block, is going to have his chance to be a free agent and see what's out there. And there's been multiple teams that have said they might be interested. The Hawks, Pistons, two teams that are really looking for a stretch big. Nas Reed will have some interest from different teams. So that got me thinking, like, okay, if Miles goes back to Indiana, I don't know what's going to happen with Nas Reed. Not a lot of teams have cap space. Maybe some of those teams are like, okay, maybe KP's our option because KP has a 1-year deal, right? So it's not entirely risk free, but you're not committed to anything long term.
Right.
So let's take a look at the Pistons here, Greg. Here's the trade
Okay.
that I came up with. So I'll pull it up on the screen here so you can see it. What we got here, very straightforward. Just Celtics and Pistons involved here. Celtics send out Kristaps Porzingis, and we're gonna send out a second-round pick as well here. I put this year's 32nd in there. We can talk about picks later. And the Celtics take back. They get Isaiah Stewart, 2 years, $15 million each, and then they get Simone Fontecchio, who's on an $8.3 million expiring. Saves the Celtics $7.4 million, but then they also get Isaiah Stewart, who I think he's not obviously I think he's different than the Pirtle and the Hartenstein mold, but I think he is another guy that you can look to as, hey, this guy's a big body, a rebounder. I don't know that he's your long-term starting center, but I like Beef Stew as a guy that's in your rotation to mix it up. And so this gives him a year as kind of a starting role for you to kind of figure out what it is. And 15 million, dude, it's so manageable
Yeah.
that when Tatum comes
Great
back,
contract.
when you clean off some more money, you can kind of figure out what that looks like. So I like the idea of Beef Stew coming in, being your starter for a year. You get to really figure out how he fits, how he meshes, gives you, we talked about this team not being tough enough. No, it's fucking tough. This is Isaiah Stewart.
Beef stew. Yeah.
Beef Stew's trying to fight
That's
LeBron.
that's some chewy meat there, my guy.
So I think this deal has some appeal. And then on the Pistons side, why they might do this. They have Jalen Duren. He's going to be their clear starting center. If they're
Mhm.
interested in Miles Turner, they know they need more shooting. They know they need a big that can kind of spread it out.
Yeah.
So even if KP is not going to be the answer long term, take a free 1-year look at what KP does for your spacing if he can shoot from 27, 28, 29 feet, and you have a healthy Jaden Ivey, you have Cade Cunningham, you have, let's say Malik Beasley comes back, and now you have, Beasley on one side, KP on the other, Duran's cleaning up the boards, and then you just have driving lanes for Ivy and Cunningham. Like, that sounds appealing to me for them to take a flyer on and then not have to be pot committed that if it doesn't work out, okay, cool, we just have some cap space back, and now we have, I think Cade's a stud, and so now you just kind of say, hey, we need to find someone for Cade, let's go find him a running mate, and you got some freedom to do it. So I think there's appeal on both sides potentially for this framework.
I like this deal, man. I know you've been out of the game for a little bit, Will. You've been dealing with a newborn baby girl at home, but I think you'll know the answer to this question. What is the biggest trend we've seen across the NBA this past season in terms of lineups?
In terms of lineups,
types of lineups.
See, I think this go. I'm trying to think of like the most recent playoff trends, and I feel like it goes two ways. I feel like we've seen some double bigs, and we've also just seen kind of no bigs. Those are like two different ones that I've seen.
Double bigs. That's the answer. Teams are trending bigger. The teams like the Thunder, with Chet and Hartenstein, like that's a double big lineup they throw out there. When you think of the Pistons, and you think, is there a double big combination that they can throw out that makes any sense with their current construction? They don't have it, right? Beef Stew and Duran are their two guys, and they're very similar players. They're both beefy rim protectors. And Kristaps Porzingis could probably play next to Duran and have it make somewhat sense, but you have to have, to Joe Mazzulla's quotes from the beginning of the season, you have to have curveballs, and Beef Stew going for Duran is just one, you're getting 48 minutes of really physical center play, which is great, but I think you need to have something else that you can go to. And we saw their biggest Achilles heel was their lack of shooting. So to your point, if they're looking at Miles Turner, I think Kristaps Porzingis is a pretty good person to plug in there for 1 year. And actually, I think if he goes to the Pistons, they go right up the rankings into like top 3 team in the East next year.
Yeah, I mean, if he's healthy, like he fits what they need, right? Like, and he slots into, right in the kind of pecking order where you need Kristaps Porzingis to be, because you don't know, to your point, he's a unicorn in multiple ways. You don't know if he's going to be there, so you don't want him to be your number 1 or your number 2. But if he's your, 3rd or 4th offensive option, gives you, I mean, that's some pretty good rim protection right there with Duran and Porzingis that you have on the court at all times. I mean, that's a really good option. So I think for the Pistons, that would be something to look at. And I think in general, when it comes to Porzingis, if you're a Celtics fan and you're seeing reports of the Hawks or the Pistons, whoever it might be, they're interested in Turner, those should be teams that you start to kind of keep an eye on as to see what happens in the offseason, because those are going to be spots where I think Porzingis will find appeal. You got any other Porzingis trades or any other Porzingis teams that you think might be lurking out there, Greg?
Not necessarily, man. I think he's just such a devalued asset right now. I can't see too many teams talking themselves into him, and I think it's going to be likely that he's on the Celtics next year. I think the idea of the expiring contract, when he's played, he's been great, right? And when he's been healthy, he's been great. We just haven't seen that enough. And I do think the Celtics are still, with the new owner, they're still going to need to put fans in the seats, man. They can't go full tank. I heard Simmons and Russillo talking about like there's a chance that they go full tank mode, blow it up. I don't see that happening. I don't think it makes any sense. You're gonna see Jrue Holiday moved. You're gonna see Sam Hauser moved, and I'd be very surprised if there's another move out there. I think the Celtics at least try and remain competitive through the first half of the year, and then if they need to make some moves at the deadline, they make moves at the deadline.
So that's where I'm at. I think my best guess is, like you said, I think Hauser guaranteed gone. Holiday, I think most likely gone. And then I think with Porzingis, I'm way more expecting him to have to kind of prove his health and availability. And then like he's more of an in-season type trade, right? For a team that's, going to pay half his salary for a year or whatever it might be. And they're like, you know what? He seems healthy. And I think like people aren't going to like to hear this, but I think the Lakers make a decent amount of sense for KP. Although, KP Luka didn't go great in Dallas, but I think it's also a different KP, which people need to remember. Like KP was really demanding a bunch of post up touches, and he should still get some post up touches. He's a much better post up player than he was then. But I think him off of LeBron and Reeves, and like they need big men. They can't play Jackson Hayes, but we found that out. So I think there will be more appeal for Porzingis if he proves it in the regular season. I think that would be their best return. So we'll see. I think it's going to get real interesting here as we get towards the draft. Greg, you and I are not draft guys, but I do want to start taking a look at some different players here. Maybe we'll try to get somebody on the show that can kind of walk us through. But I think it's interesting that the Celtics are looking for a draft pick for Jrue Holiday. So I don't know if it's this year's draft or they're just looking to kind of build their assets. But I think that's going to be interesting to keep an eye out for on draft night or leading up to it. That even though the Celtics don't have a pick until 28, they have 28 and 32 in the draft. That I kind of expect them to be pretty active right now. Like I think that's going to be something that we can expect is for them to be active on draft night. So we'll see what that looks like. Before we get out of here, Greg, let's just hit a couple other things real quick. Can we talk Knicks for just like 2 minutes?
Sure. Let's do it.
What the fuck is happening in New York? Like, I feel like this should have been a pretty good result for their season. And yet it feels like they feel the need to have like all these scapegoats, and they're firing Tibbs, and firing Tibbs I thought was totally on the table when the playoffs started. But when he beat the team that the team was assembled to beat, and then the team that they weren't assembled to beat them. Like and Tibbs, whether it was out of necessity, finally played some bench guys, and like to his credit, in my opinion, he at least wasn't stubborn enough to say I'm not going to do it. He might have begrudgingly did it, but he did do it. And so I was kind of, I don't really understand for the Knicks why there's causing all this chaos. When you look at the finals the last couple of years and this year, like one of the things that besides lineups that sticks out, Greg, you know what wins? Continuity. Like continuity has been, look at the Celtics last year. Look at the core of that team. Look at the core of the Nuggets the year before. Look at the core of the Bucks the year before that. Look at the teams that you have between the Thunder and the Pacers. Like there's a lot of continuity year over year, even as you add in a new player. Like this is the second year of Pascal Siakam. Imagine the second year of Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. Like I feel like the Knicks are just rocking the boat right now. And when you look at the East, they just don't need to. Like, I feel like they're in a pretty good spot with Tatum out basically all of next year. Cavs are kind of in like a stage of who are we? What are we doing? The Pacers, they're going to be there. Giannis might be leaving. It's right there for you, Knicks. Like, just make a few, a few moves on the edges. But instead, they're just making this so drama filled. I don't get it. I don't get it at all what's happening with them.
Yeah, to look at the playoffs and say Tibbs is the problem is just a joke, man. Like the problem was Karl Towns, the fact that he can't guard anybody. Like that was the problem.
Yeah.
He was able to guard the Celtics because, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, the Celtics just had the worst game plan possible and just let Karl Towns play basically in his own defense, boxes and elbows, with people attacking him in straight lines where his feet are already set and he's able to funnel people to help. That's just not how you attack someone who can't move their feet. You attack someone who can't move I'm getting pissed off again. You attack someone who can't move their feet by getting side to side movement, putting him in multiple pick and roll actions, having him have to guard multiple screens.
Play with some freaking pace. Just get out and run a little bit.
Run. Tommy Heinsohn, run. Like that's all you had to do. And that's what the Pacers were great at, and they had an identity that they stuck to. And the Celtics, for whatever reason, just thought they could play with their food and thought on paper they were better. And they thought that was going to be enough. But Karl Towns was the problem, man. And there's reasons why the Suns, very quickly, even though Devin Booker's one of his best friends, the report comes out, they have zero interest in acquiring Karl Towns via
trade. That should be a great return for Kevin Durant, who's 37 on a huge contract. Like you would think they'd be like, oh yeah, we'll take that to get like some more longevity out of the Devin Booker prime. And they're like, nah. We'll find another way.
And to your point, Tibbs's rigidity reared its ugly head for a couple of games, but then he decided to make the change, and he has to be given credit for that. So there has to have been like so many issues behind the scenes, especially with the Bridges comments that had come out, like playing too many minutes and all that. But he changed in the playoffs, and like that's the moment Knicks fans and the Knicks organization were probably waiting for. It's like, Tibbs, like, when are you going to finally change? And he did it in the biggest moment,
Right.
and it worked at times. But the issue was that some of their best lineups were their defensive lineups that didn't involve Karl Towns or Jalen Brunson on the court.
Yeah,
like,
that's
like
tough.
they have to, I was thinking about that team today, and I was just like, they can't come back with both of those guys next year. Towns has negative value. You can't trade Brunson, but if you could trade Brunson, what could you get for him? Because you just like you can't run out a team in today's NBA with two of the worst individual defenders on the
You can get
court
by
and
with
expect to
one.
win.
Can't get by with two.
Can't get by with two.
That's the rule. You can't get by
Yeah.
with two. So yeah, we'll see. New York, man, it felt like it feels like it doesn't need to be this messy, but it is. And hey, that's at least a little bit of solace that we can take given the way that the Celtics season
But dude,
ended over here.
even going back to the Pacers Knicks series, like Carlisle's comments when they asked him, like, "Hey, what's changed in the second half?" He's like, "Oh, they played their good defensive players." Like he actually said that in a post game
Yeah.
press conference, and he, what the opposite of good is bad. So they weren't playing the bad defensive players, and those two guys that were on the bench were Karl Towns and Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, yeah, that was so weird to see all those runs that were made with Brunson on the bench, man. That was really one of the strangest things to see. And obviously Brunson's a great closer, but yeah, that's a problem that the Knicks are gonna have to figure out. But you brought the Pacers, man. How are you feeling about your Boston Pacers? 1-1, heading to Indy Wednesday night. How you feeling?
I've called the first two games. I said Pacers were going to win close in game one, and I thought the Thunder were going to blow them out in game two. So I'm going to go Pacers win game three and then lose the rest of the games, and the Thunders win in six.
Yeah, this feels, even though the Thunder don't have the pedigree the Warriors had against the Celtics, it feels like kind of a similar series in the way that I think it's going to go, which is that's exactly how it played out with the Celtics and Warriors, right? Celtics up
Yeah.
2-1. Curry has his, one of his Mount Rushmore games in game 4, and the Celtics just never recover. It feels like Indy's got one more in them. I would suspect, like you, it's game 3. And then eventually watching the Thunder when they have Wallace, Caruso, and Dort going, you can't dribble the basketball versus them.
Yeah.
And like, and that's like not even getting to J-Dub, right? Not even getting to him, and then Hartenstein and Holmgren on the back end. And like, and Shea's a solid defender, but what Shea is actually really good at, which their whole team is good at, is just kind of being the guy that's not in the play, that all of a sudden is in the play and is grabbing the ball from behind after you beat your man. So it's just, yeah, I can't imagine the Pacers putting it together for 3 more wins, but goddamn, they're a lot of fun. I just want close games because they're so much fun when it's close.
Yeah, Pacers are a lot of fun. And then, the Thunder, man. So I was watching game 2 with Brett and Townsend, and we were talking about SGA because he had an unbelievable game in game 2.
MVP.
And we were trying to find a good comparison for just like the way he plays. And because his game is kind of so old school, we were going back to the 90s. And we were throwing out like all these kind of like shifty small guards, but Shea's 6'6", right? So like the two people that we kind of landed on was 6'6" Rondo with a J, right? Which that's not I wouldn't say it's a new comparison, because when he was coming out of Kentucky, a lot of people were making the Rondo comparisons there. And then Townsend said AI, so he moves like Allen Iverson. What are your thoughts on that?
I kind of like that. So maybe Allen Iverson with Penny Hardaway's body, something like to that effect. For some reason, Penny Hardaway, he's not the same passer that Penny Hardaway. Like, Penny was dropping dimes when he was in Orlando. But I think that mid-range game with the size and length and obviously Shea and Penny get a little bit more athletic. I mean, AI's got a ton of athleticism for his size, but I think like with that size that they have, they can use their bodies in ways that AI just never was going to be able to at his size. You know what I mean? So I think that's pretty good, actually. I think AI with Penny's body, I like that as Shea's current comp.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that I was kind of saying was he's so unique that it's kind of hard to find those comps for him. But in the future, people are going to go look back and be like, oh, that's SGA there. Like he's kind of setting a new mold for what an NBA superstar can look like. Because, he's got some elements of Kobe and MJ and the mid-range assassin game in there. He's got some elements of Dwayne Wade. But then when you're in a league where there's like the perfect MJ comparison in Anthony Edwards. And then there's Dwayne Wade, who has like the perfect comparison in Donovan Mitchell, right?
Mhm.
It's like you can't really compare Shea to those guys when there's already two guys that reminds you so much of those other guys, right?
Right.
So I think in the future, people are going to look back and be like, just like Steph Curry redefined like a modern superstar, I think like the bag work of SGA, I think, 10 years, you're going to see a lot of like SGA clones.
Yeah, mixtapes are going to be on fire when they start
Yeah.
comparing those two side by side. And watching SGA, obviously Tatum, good to see that he's back in Boston. There was Torrey Craig had a picture of him today. He's at the Celtics facility.
That was great to see.
Watching SGA dominate from the mid range, I'm just like Tatum. It makes me want more mid range J, because it's just like, dude, if you can go from 10 threes a game to 7 threes a game and like move those to some form of the mid range, like I just really think that would take Tatum's game to even the next level, which I know we'll see from the injury standpoint, but that's
But
always been
maybe
something I've
maybe the injury forces him to not play so athletic, and he has to put himself,
Mhm.
in the mid post and go to work from there because he's unable to have the shake that he has from the perimeter at this point. So maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise for him.
I like that. That's the silver lining that we all need to end this podcast on. Jason Tatum injury is silver lining, going to put him more into the mid post. Greg, going to be an interesting summer here. We got rumors that I think are going to just nonstop.
Can't
NBA
wait.
Finals Wednesday, Game 3 coming up. So we'll have some more thoughts as this series goes on, and then NBA Draft is following up right after it. So we'll have a bunch of rumors. We'll try to get somebody on here. We'll try to do a little bit of draft work here of some guys the Celtics might be interested in here towards the end of the first round, beginning of the second round. But Greg, enjoy the rest of your week, man. And it's, as always, good talking some hoop with you.
You too, brother.
All right, y'all. Peace.